And first off today, we'll be hearing from Danielle Tiplady, student nurse and leading activist in the Bursary or Bust campaign.
Hello everyone, it's really great to be here with you today and to see so many of you as well, and thank you for having me. On the 25th of November, George Osborne and the Tories shamefully slashed the bursaries for nursing, midwifery and associated healthcare professional students. They're choosing to instead saddle us with up to £64,000 loans to train, and they think this will increase the numbers by 10,000. Now, why is this bad? I believe in free education for all, for a start. And to me, the bursary cuts mark the complete death of state education. As an NHS student, we work clinical placements of up to 2,300 hours. We work nights, weekends, bank holidays. We do an academic degree in 1.5 years, which I can tell you is very, very tough. We are wholeheartedly dedicated to our training, our profession, our patients, which includes every single one of you. These changes will clearly put people off from entering professions like nursing. Consequently, the whole future of the NHS workforce is at severe threat. Not only are these changes, but if you boil down to it, these changes are actually very insulting. How can you want to charge someone up to £26 an hour to work? The evidence is growing. We have anecdotal evidence from the RCN. 1,300 students, past and new, stated that they would not have done nursing without the bursary. The RCN also did a survey and they had 70,000 responses. 70% of those also said they would not have done nursing without the bursary. If we want to add some statistics into this, Unison did an independent economic analysis which found that there will be a significant drop in applicants, and something that we've not thought of before. This will have a direct effect on the universities, who could lose up to £77 million and not be able to sustain the courses anymore. This means more job losses for lecturers. The NHS Pay Review Body have spoken out in support of us. The Migrant Advisory Committee have spoken out in support of us. On the front line, I can tell you that every single nurse, midwife or associated healthcare professional or doctor understands that the bursary cuts will risk the future of the NHS. Nobody can understand. This attack is not limited. We've got the junior doctors who are going through an awful struggle with the government. Nurses have had their post-education funding cut as well, so now the chances of me doing a master's are very, very limited. We have the nurse associate role, which will see people trained in-house and not have a degree, and also the apprenticeship. This is just a cost-cutting exercise to make a cheaper workforce. We have chronic underfunding in the NHS with £22 billion worth of efficiency savings. We have the cleaners and the porters and the housekeeping staff who have all been outsourced and lost wages, lost hours. We have the cuts to agency nursing. We have the cuts to safe staffing, which now see our wards staffed to the absolute minimum. We've also had a pay loss of 14% since 2010, as well as an actual general lack of respect by the Tories for all of the NHS and its staff. Like other public services, we are being attacked, demoralised and destroyed until we cannot function anymore. To sweep in with an alternative, a better alternative, a private alternative, like that mentioned in Hunt and Gove's book on page 78, in which they state they want to replace the NHS with a private system. Let me make this absolutely clear that private healthcare does not work. Within my placements, our laundry is outsourced to private companies. Often I go to get things to wash my patients and they're not there for hours and hours and hours. Then there's the £18 sandwiches, which we have to buy out of hours, which I won't even get started on. Then we have the transport services, which are outsourced to private companies who have a 10-minute slot, who will go and leave a patient after putting them in the stretcher and leave after 10 minutes if we are not ready. Private companies base profit over care and basic human needs. Our NHS cannot become this. Now, The bursary cuts and everything within the NHS are just part of the wider picture of austerity. Daily we see consequences of austerity within our profession. They devastate our patients and their families. Let me give you some examples from my placement in A&E. We have the homeless man who comes back every single night because he's got nowhere to stay for a warm cup of tea and a place to sleep. Then we've got the elderly patient. There's been 1.2 billion cuts in health and social care. The elderly patient who was left alone on the floor after having a stroke, who can't afford a carer, who now will not recover because they were left for so long and they have no one. And we sadly have, and I see this a lot, people who try to take their own lives because of things like bedroom tax, because they can't afford to pay their rent and look after their families anymore. What I found most shocking is, through talking to DPAC, this wasn't something that I was very aware of, was the personal independence payments. Now, I can't even begin to comprehend this. A disabled person has been to a doctor and been told they have a disability by a doctor. They then have to fill out a 35-page document to submit to the DWP, to then go and get assessed by someone else to tell them that they've got a disability and whether they're eligible for a little bit of money to have some incontinence pads or a wheelchair. This is madness and very, very cruel. Austerity is ripping apart our NHS at stealth. Since the bursary cuts, myself and other students have been campaigning against these evidently destructive changes. We've demonstrated, which I've seen some people here daily at the moment at demonstrations, protested, lobbied, debated, we've walked out of our placements, we've done die-ins, we have tried everything. We have put our heart and souls into trying to protect the future for our patients and our profession. And the Tories will simply not listen to us. However, now we are in a totally different position than we were 2 weeks ago. Not only do I qualify as a nurse in 4 weeks, but actually because of the referendum, our political climate is very, very different. The bursary cuts, as I've said, are a part of a bigger picture, which is austerity. It is austerity by the Tories that has ripped apart our society. It has divided our society. It's drove those to vote in the UK in either way because of austerity. We have become a toxic society because of austerity. Now, I don't want to talk about the vote, because whether you're in or out, I feel now is the time that we need to debate, unite, and push forward for a society and principles that we all aspire to have together. The Tories are a mess. Cameron has resigned. Woohoo! Boris won't be running for PM. Woo! But, however, sadly, I'll go into that in a minute. However, they have caused a very, very deep divide between us all, and we can't let them separate us anymore. We must use this opportunity to push for a general election. The Tories are not the same party that won with, let's face it, a very small majority. We must too, and I don't normally do party political broadcasts, we must too get behind Jeremy Corbyn, a principled and honest man who is shamefully being bullied by other MPs. I have found this very uncomfortable to watch and sad. How these MPs say that they represent the people when they are behaving in such an undignified and cruel manner is beyond me. Jeremy believes in a redistribution of wealth. He stands and fights against austerity daily, which I said is toxic in our society. He understands and empathises how it is for me and you. From an NHS perspective, our Jeremy has tabled an opposition debate for the bursaries, marched shoulder to shoulder with the junior doctors on their strikes. He's met qualified students and staff in the NHS, and he has taken the time to respect us. He is committed to renationalising the NHS. Now Cameron has gone, Boris has gone, Farage has gone, and who's still standing? Jeremy Corbyn. He is a strong leader, and he has the biggest mandate in history for a leader, and we must get behind him. And if it went to a contest again, he would win, and the NHS students would be behind him 100% of the way. To combine all of these issues we face, I ask you on the 16th of July to come to the demonstration to end austerity, to stand up to racism, the Tories out and Jeremy for Prime Minister, 12 o'clock, BBC House. Together we are the people and we have power, and now let's get together and build a mass movement for the society that we all want. And just to finish as well, just a bit of chanting. When I say Tories, you say out. Tories, 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 Tories. Thank you.
So our next speaker is a member of the Unite Petroleum branch at Grangemouth and co-founder of the Thai campaign, Liam Stevenson.
Thank you for that lovely warm reception, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about the recent dispute that took place in Grangemouth where the dockers were on strike and ourselves within the petroleum branch refused to cross their picket line and did our best to bring Scotland to its knees. But before I start, I'm going to highlight the importance, because I know a lot of people here won't know anything about Grangemouth. In Scotland, we have 3 fuel terminals, but only one of them can supply jet fuel, Jet A1 fuel, the fuel that flies aeroplanes, and that is Grangemouth INEOS. We have another fuel terminal within Grangemouth dock area, owned by another company, but it doesn't do jet fuel. What happened? The Grangemouth dock area also 9 million tonnes of cargo goes through the Grangemouth dock every year, and that represents 30% of Scotland's GDP. So Grangemouth is an absolute the heartbeat of Scotland. But what I'm going to talk to you about is the hub. Following the INEOS dispute that you probably would have heard of in 2013, when Jim Ratcliffe threatened to close the plant and decimate a massive community, there was a hub set up, and it was set up by various unions. We wanted to bring together refinery workers, dockers, rail workers and tanker drivers. This could give us more leverage during any future disputes. We'll come to that very shortly. But not long after this hub began, we realised that the companies were taking active interest. They weren't too happy with us. They wanted to know where the meetings were. They were sending spies to find out who was at the meetings. They were clearly concerned. And they were concerned because they've never dealt with trade unions acting in this fashion, whereby we're all getting together, we're all plotting together, we're all supporting one another. But within the hub, we run education courses as well, which are very, very important. These are open to all unions, and it's an attempt to encourage other branches to establish their own hubs. And these hubs need to happen up and down the length and breadth of the country, in my opinion. But the overall view is to bring all these branches together, whether you're in Scotland, England, Northern Ireland or Wales. Now, the hub took off much quicker than was ever expected, because very quickly there was international trade unions that wanted to be involved. There are now links with unions in Norway, America and Germany. The hub continues to expand because the ethos is that if companies speak to each other and cooperate on deals and negotiations, then so should trade unionists. We have built solidarity with fellow trade unionists. We are actively attempting to rebuild the strength of the unions so that they can fight the attempts to weaken our movement, such as the Anti-Trade Union Bill. We believe that the stronger workforces also must be there, and they must be able to protect the weaker ones, the smaller ones, the people who have never been on strike before. We need to be there to steer them and encourage them and to give them that strength and confidence. But an example of this was the strike from March just gone. The dockers had been in 15 months' worth of negotiations with the Port Authority. Amicable negotiations, things were going well, so they thought. When all of a sudden the Port Authority imposed new conditions upon them, which was going to affect working weekends and shift premiums and so on and so forth. And it was going to cost these guys in at the dock an average of £1,800 a year. But before the strike, the Port Authority were very arrogant and very confident. They'd never been in strike before, these dockers. And the Port Authority were very confident they wouldn't get support. They thought the boys' bottle would crash. It didn't. The result came back from the ballot at 100% solid for strike action. This left them struggling with only management and scab agency employees. And what happened then was they went from a position, like I said, 9 million tonnes of cargo every year, 30% of Scotland's GDP goes through that port. And it ended up in a position whereby generally a freight vehicle, a skelly trailer would go in there, have a box lifted off, another box lifted on, in round about 60 minutes to 90 minutes. But during the industrial action, it was taking 5.5 hours to do this. They were on a sticky wicket. So I arrive working in my tanker at Grangemouth to go and load my first load from Grangemouth, Ineos. The loading terminal within the dock area was out of bounds because nobody was crossing the picket line. We were very strong, our branch. Nobody was going near it. That was out of play. There is one other loading terminal in Clydebank, Glasgow. Only some of us can use that, but very quickly the stock levels were going through the floor. On the Thursday afternoon of this strike, I had headed through to Grangemouth from my base to load my first job and was met with an amazing sight. 30 petrol tankers lined up outside the terminal. Now, Grangemouth is not a big place, and it's single carriageway roads, and you can imagine what 30 petrol tankers look like stacked up back to back. So the police arrived on scene, and there was chaos and carnage. And what happened then was they made their way up the line, and they asked each driver individually, "Are you going to cross that line?" Every driver says no. They says, "Well, you better go down there, do a U-turn and get." So we then had the glorious sight of seeing 30 tankers doing about turns and leaving. But what's also important, within the terminal, within the Ineos terminal, we had BP, Esso, Jet, and some other smaller companies, and also the guys that deliver the jet fuel. They couldn't get out. They were stuck in. We were stuck out and they were stuck in. So it was a double whammy. So on the Friday, myself and my shop steward and Big Ramey, the journalist for the paper, I'm sure you all know Ramey, we all made it through to go and support the boys on the picket line. And what had happened was there was an agreement in place between the Port Authority and the boys in the union that they would not they would not use one specific exit gate from the port, because this exit gate interfered with the Grangemouth Ineos in-out gate. But some driver, in his haste to get out of the dock, used this banned road, which then gave us the opportunity to say, listen, the picket line goes from here to there. The picket line was moved swiftly, and before we knew it, Grangemouth Ineos had come to a halt. The union lawyers, though, were very nervous, very, very, very nervous. And this brings me on to something I talk about, the boots and the suits, whereby the people in the suits within the union become very nervous. They were worried about the legalities of the strike. But we were very clear, whether it was a protest, a strike, a picket line, whatever it was, legal or illegal, we were not crossing it. Simple as that. Our branch, and I've been mandated by the branch to state here today that our branch is ready, willing and able to break the law as and when required. But what we need from the suits within the union, I think sometimes we need them to be a bit stronger, and before they get that picket line lifted and let's get ACAS in and let's have negotiation, or let's get the deals done before we lift the picket lines. Let's do that first. But I suppose when you've got general secretaries earning more money than the Prime Minister of the country, the notion that radical thought or even radical action might be forthcoming, I think, is kind of far-fetched. But the Grangemouth dispute was amicably concluded, and the dockers had all their impositions lifted and were very happy moving on. But what I'm going to talk about as well is what I call a neoliberal mindset that does exist within too many workplaces. And the thing is, this neoliberal mindset has been something that's been fed into us, forced into us, if you want to look at it that way, whereby we sit and we think, well, if I've been offered 3% in public sector, workers have only been offered 1%, then I should maybe not ask for any more and I should take my 3% and be happy with that. No, why should we? Because we all deserve more than that, much more than that. We need to put our foot down and we need to demand more, because I'm sure there'll be some in the room tonight that probably regard profit as unpaid wages. I'm going to speed up. I'm being chased on a wee bit here, so I'm going to speed up and I'm going to miss some of my speech out. I'm going to miss quite a bit actually. But what I want to finish in saying is that obviously I'm Scottish and I work in Scotland, and hopefully there'll be some people here from Wales as well. I know there's certainly someone from Ireland on the panel. And the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Parliament thus far have been very encouraging, making some fantastic encouraging sounds about the fact that they are going to protect us from the harshest aspects of the anti-trade union legislation that's coming. But what we need to remember is that people here in England are not going to get that luxury. They're not going to be protected from the wrath of the Tories. And that is when we need to use David Cameron's rhetoric against him and show him that we are all in this together when we stand up and we oppose all and any attacks on their rights, their security or their employment. And what we must remember is that an attack on one trade unionist is an attack on all trade unionists. And in these uncertain times, following the Leave vote, if there's probably going to be some more squeezes in the public sector and stuff, we need to oppose that. And we need to be very clear. And in the face of this uncertainty, we must stand together. Thank you.
Next, we'll be hearing from a member of the BMA and junior doctor, Megan Parsons.
Thank you. So I joined the party last Marxism, and it turns out it was good timing because a couple of months later, Jeremy Hunt said he was going to impose his junior doctor contract on us. And he was using his contract as an attack on our workers' rights, an attack on our patient safety, an attack on the NHS as a whole. And he was using it to demoralise our staff further and undermine the care we can provide in the hope of reducing public support for the NHS so we don't fight so hardly to keep it. So we know attacks like this have been going on for years throughout the public sector, but it's not so common that the government choose to attack a group that are typically apolitical or actively conservative. And I'm proud to say that the fight back has been amazing. So we've had the first junior doctor strike in history. We've had junior doctors marching through London and chanting Tories out outside Parliament. And we're realising that politics affect every aspect of our lives and every aspect of our patients' lives. And we're now seeing the bigger picture of the fight for the NHS and the fight for our public sector. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for the amazing solidarity that we've received from the public, from organisations, political organisations, and from other trade unions. And the solidarity that we've received has empowered us to fight for our rights and our patients' rights, but it's also exposed us to others who are facing similar struggles and to the idea that we're stronger together. And I'm proud to say that we are acting on this. So on Friday, our chair released a statement of support for the NUT and for their upcoming strike. And I know that many of us will be joining them on their pickets and on their demos. And this year's been amazing because I've got to see firsthand how struggle changes people. And the discussions had and the contacts made and the eyes that have been opened through our dispute have kind of laid the foundations on which we can build further movements for the NHS and for our patients, but also for the wider health and welfare of our colleagues, other trade unionists and the public. And this is vital because what has become more and more apparent are the issues that the NHS faces that cannot be solved with a new contract. So our NHS as it is today is unsustainable. But that's not because a universal and comprehensive, free at the point of access healthcare system can't work, but it's because it's been systematically understaffed, underfunded and overstretched. So whilst I'm confident that we will get a no vote for our contract referendum, whatever way it goes, I think that we must continue because there are so many more battles to be won with the bursary or bust campaign, with the NHS reinstatement bill, and with the closure of every A&E or local hospital bed. But as usual, our government and the media are doing their best to try and distract us from the true threats to our NHS. So rather than talking about it being overstretched because they've cut and privatised all the services that prevent people becoming unwell, or because of their austerity measures that have increased poverty and increased physical and mental ill health across the country, they talk about our services being overstretched because of migration. So our NHS depends on immigrants, and with our ageing population and with Hunt's attitude to the current staff, we're going to need more and more immigration. So it's taken this dispute to kind of give us the motivation and the confidence to address the broader issues that are kind of affecting our NHS. And it's taken the kind of political discussions that we've had on our pickets to open our eyes to that. So we've had official BMA support for the convoy to Calais. We've passed national motions saying that we're going to lobby the government to accept more refugees. And I think it's vital. So it's key that we explain the truth about immigration and our welfare state at the moment, and probably now more than ever, because of post-Brexit. We don't want to leave this to the likes of Farage and Boris. And in fact, we don't want to leave shaping any of our system post-Brexit to the likes of Farage and Boris. So I think whichever way we voted individually, we need to take this opportunity to organise, and we need to engage those that feel that we need to engage those that feel that the EU was doing nothing for them, and we need to stand with them in solidarity against neoliberalism and the resultant austerity that is responsible for their reduced living standards. But we also need to show those who see a Leave vote as a racist vote that Britain is not racist, and that all migrants, EU migrants and non-EU migrants, are welcome here. So we need to direct the anger of both of the sides to those who are really responsible for the reduced living standards in this country, and that's the big businesses, the media, and our government. So on this note, I'd agree that we need to build the July 16th demonstration, but I think also we need to build the Unwelcome the Tories demonstration in Birmingham in October, because we can't have them celebrating in my home city and in a city where, because of their actions and inactions, 37% of children are living below the poverty line. And that's why we must fight back. So we live in a world that will attack those who are the most vulnerable before claiming the money we use to bail out bankers or the tax that our millionaires and billionaires should be paying to our state. And we live in a world where people are having their cities decimated in imperialistic wars for which we have billions of pounds for, but we don't have money for healthcare, housing and education. We're living at a time of crises. The refugee crisis, the NHS is in crisis, and education is in crisis. But this is the crisis of capitalism, and these are self-made crises. And if it's our society that have made them, our society can reverse them when we fight back. And we are fighting back. So we've got the junior doctors, we've got the bursary or bus campaign, we've got the teachers, we've got Pennine food strikes, we've got many other strikes. IDS has gone, Cameron's gone, Farage has gone, sorry, I'm skipped to the end. I'd say that it's all these fights that I see us fighting for, and I see the party fighting for, and it's the smaller ones and the bigger ones, and uniting them all together to make us stronger. So I'd say, if you want to be part of that, join us, and we can unite, and we can organise, and we can provide a world that we can be proud of. Thank you.
I'm very excited to be introducing the next speaker to you. Re-elected member of the Dáil, member of People Before Profit, and member of the Irish Socialist Workers Party, Richard Boyd Barrett.
Thanks very much. When I joined the SWP, it was the SWM in Ireland in, I think it was 1989. We had one branch in Dublin and one branch in Cork, and they were both very small branches. That was also the year the Berlin Wall came down, and history apparently had ended. Socialism was dead, and if you were to believe, the mainstream narrative, this small group of people meeting over a pub on Bachelor's Quay in Dublin, talking about the possibility of revolutionary change, seems like, the behaviour of cranks. But how things change, and it brings to mind the words of Marx in the Communist Manifesto, where he talked about all that is solid melts into the air, and that has certainly been the case in Ireland over the last while. I mean, at that time, not just had history ended and the defeat of communism, but in Ireland, we were completely dominated by two right-wing conservative parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and a pathetic Labour Party who had variously propped up either of those right-wing parties for the entire history of the state. The Catholic Church still wielded very significant power, to the extent that in 1991, a 14-year-old girl who had been raped was imprisoned by the Irish state because her parents told the police that they were going to bring her to Britain for an abortion. But just at this very moment, when, if you like, things looked bleak on the international scale and in Ireland, things began to change, and there was a massive mobilisation of people around what was called the X case to fight for the right of that young woman to have an abortion. And that was the beginning of the pillars of the Irish establishment beginning to collapse. And for many people, it just seemed impossible that we would shake and dismantle these pillars of the Irish establishment. And then you move on the story to the last few weeks, and it is an absolutely extraordinary transformation. Fianna Fáil, one of those right-wing parties that dominated the Irish state, in the 2011 election lost 56 seats. This is in a parliament of only 160. They lost 56 seats. Absolutely, the party that had dominated the Irish political scene collapsed as a result of its imposition, its presiding over the economic crisis of 2008, and then the imposition of brutal troika austerity. After its collapse, the Fine Gael and the Labour Party came into power, promising to reverse this brutal austerity and protect the vulnerable against the ravages that had been imposed by the troika and Fianna Fáil before them. And within days, they had betrayed all of those promises and carried on the same cruel and vicious austerity assault. For huge numbers of people that had invested their hopes in the Labour Party, it was a shock. It was an incredible shock that a Labour Party who had promised to protect people could do what they did in such a short time, to just turn on people and stab them in the back and carry on this vicious austerity assault. And the consequences, the human consequences for Irish society were absolutely appalling. Homelessness went through the roof, poverty, deprivation, suicide. The incomes of people were absolutely slaughtered, 20 to 30%. The public health service was torn to pieces with billions worth of cuts. 10% of the public sector were lost their jobs. And all of this, extraordinary assault, people were just shell-shocked. And then suddenly, the earth moved with the mobilisation around the water charges. And it began in small working class areas in parts of Dublin, in Cork, with people spontaneously getting out on the street and preventing the newly established Irish Water, a demand of the Troika to impose these water charges and put water meters on everybody's house so that they could charge them. And in a place called Toker, I think in Cork, a small working class area, people just began to come out on the street and say, we're not allowing this to happen. And suddenly it just went viral. And across the country, in every town, in every village, in every working class area, the resistance exploded to the point where on some of the biggest demonstrations, 2 years of prolonged and escalating struggle, we had 250 to 300,000 people on the street on the biggest demonstrations. And I mean, if you think about proportionately about the population of Ireland, that would be the equivalent, compared to Britain, that would be the equivalent of having 6 million people on the street in Britain. And that struggle continued for about 2 years. And even as that struggle was escalating, there were still, I think, people thinking that this will, it'll eventually diffuse. And I think the Irish establishment thought that they could wait it out and it would eventually diffuse. But it didn't. It just kept getting bigger and resulted in the election that has just passed with the wipeout of, I said Fianna Fáil lost 56 seats in 2011. Fine Gael lost exactly, coincidentally, the same number of seats in the last election. The Labour Party, who had had their biggest vote in their history in 2011, collapsed to 6 seats. Seven seats. And People Before Profit and the Anti-austerity Alliance had 6. And in addition to that, 4 other people who would come from the revolutionary tradition were also elected. So there are now more revolutionary socialists in the Irish Parliament than there is representatives of the Labour Party. And suddenly it just goes contagious. And this is what is now happening. In the last week, the water charges, the government, which is still a Fine Gael government, but is now a minority, propped up by the other party, Fianna Fáil, but who don't control the parliament. And because they don't control the parliament, and on the back of the mass movement that I've described, in the last week, they had to suspend the water charges, and everybody knows they are never coming back. But much more importantly, and I'll conclude on this, once you reach that sort of watershed, suddenly the resistance goes viral. And on every front now, people understand people power, mass movements, resistance from below works. So within a week of the water charges suspension, an attempt to ratchet up bin charges by about 300% by private waste companies, spontaneous protests break out, and the government, terrified and explicitly saying, oh my God, there could be another water charges revolt, stop them. But also on all sorts of other fronts. We submitted a bill in the last week, and this sort of brings it back to the X case, for the repeal of the Eighth Amendment, the constitutional ban on abortion. And everybody knows, it'll be debated in September or October, but everybody knows that we are going to have the ban on abortion gone. All of the parties that have resisted it for decades now feel they have no choice but to lift the ban on abortion, because the people have risen and are moving forward on every front. Today, Brid Smith, our other TD, just texted me to say that following the victory of the Lewis workers in getting an 18% pay increase in the last couple of weeks, the bus workers have now put in a pay claim for 18%. So, how the worm turns. And I suppose the point I want to make is that when you're in your small branch meeting, as we were back in 1989, and you're thinking it's all very difficult and nothing's ever going to change, or we're just doing the fight for the sake of it. We're the honourable resistors that are never going to change anything. The truth is that everything you do in building the resistance, in organising revolutionary politics, matters when the system, as it is now, goes into crisis. All bets are off, and everything we do makes a difference. We are not spectators in the world. We can shape the future. And I think this is the lesson of Ireland. It is the lesson of Greece. It is the lesson of what's happening in Portugal and across Europe. And in the aftermath of the exit vote, this is the opportunity now for us to be the prophets who shape the future, as James Connolly said. So get involved in the Socialist Workers Party and in revolutionary politics. Now is our chance to change the world.
So our last speaker is Michael Bradley, Central Committee Member of the SWP.
Well, first of all, people always thank people at this point of Marxism. Firstly, thank you, Nigel Farage, for fucking off. I'd then like to thank the very tired-looking people in the red T-shirts over there, the team who've kept this event going. Monica Axel and all the volunteers who kept the creche running brilliantly over the weekend. And last of all, the staff at the Institute of Education who've been absolutely brilliant in keeping this event working smoothly. Now, look, you don't need me to tell you that 2 weeks on from the Brexit vote, we are facing a complete and utter political crisis at Westminster and of the whole political class. Marxism 2016 takes place as both political parties, the Labour and the Tory party, are effectively in meltdown. And this turmoil is going to continue. We all know that. And just think what's on the agenda. I mean, Farage going, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Secondly, there could well be a second vote for independence in Scotland. This week, we're going to have the Chilcot inquiry where hopefully Tony Blair will be pinned down for the murdering bastard that he is. And we may well have an election sooner rather than later. So let's have a look at both sides. The Tories. Cameron's gone, stabbed in the back by his mate Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson's gone, stabbed in the back by his mate Michael Gove. And now Michael Gove looks like he's going stabbed in the front by Theresa May. Now, Theresa May seems to me to be the perfect unity candidate in the Tory party at the minute. Right stuff, she was loyal to David Cameron, but she's a racist bigot. And then that way, she seems to be able to pull over UKIP votes and hold the Tory rank and file to her. Is she Margaret Thatcher, though? No. She is much, much weaker than Margaret Thatcher, and we have to be really clear about that. Now, let's look at Labour. Let's look at what's happening to Labour. The Tories are in complete crisis. The front pages of the newspapers are slamming their divisions. And what do the PLP of the Labour Party decide to do? To turn on Jeremy Corbyn. The man has got a huge mandate to lead his organisation. 60,000 people joined the Labour Party to support him last week. There are mass rallies of thousands of people around the country joining to support him. They win 2 key mayoral races, right stuff, including in London, where Cameron blamed Sadiq Khan for being an extremist, disgusting Islamophobia that went with it, right stuff. But what do the Blairites decide, and what does Ed Miliband decide? That Jeremy Corbyn is unelectable. This is absolutely incredible. You couldn't make it up. But what it means is 172 Labour MPs believe they have more democratic right than the whole of the British Labour movement. It's an utter disgrace. And let alone having no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, we have no confidence in them. When Dave Ward, the General Secretary of the CWU, came to Marxism, he said that we should pull the funding for people. I agree with him completely. I'm not one to tell Labour Party members what to do, but personally I would deselect every one of those bastards. Seems to me they're more scared of Jeremy Corbyn winning an election on an anti-austerity platform they are on him losing it. That's why we are 100% alongside Jeremy Corbyn while he is under attack. Now, up until this point, the trade union leaders have backed Jeremy Corbyn. That's a good thing. Len McCluskey talked about the fact that it was a political lynching of a decent man on Sunday when he was on TV. But now there is talk of a deal. There is talk of a deal to defend party unity. It seems to me we have to say that there should be no deal that takes away the democratic right of hundreds of thousands of Labour Party members and trade union leaders to select their own leader. There should be no retreat. There should be no compromise whatsoever. Now, millions of people feel scared about what could happen after Brexit. Now, the SWP supported a left exit against austerity. And I want to explain why we did that. We believe, really, that the EU's destruction of the Syriza government, that its support for austerity, and that it's turning the Mediterranean into a graveyard with its treatment to the refugees had to be opposed. But like Diane Abbott and Matt Rack, the FBU leader and stuff, who are people that actually argued to stay in, write stuff over it, we believe that what that vote was about more than anything else was a cry of rage and anger from ordinary working class people against years of attacks and years of austerity. We believe that that vote has weakened the ruling class in this country and has weakened the ruling class internationally. But of course, as a central part of the official campaigns, both of Remain and of Leave, we saw racism, we saw anti-immigration rhetoric, and we saw Islamophobia. We saw the Tories and UKIP and the right wing rip up an atmosphere where Jo Cox could be killed outside her constituency by a Nazi. That was the kind of horrible, poisonous atmosphere that was developed around that campaign. And millions of people fear an intensification of the attacks on migrants, Muslims and of refugees. And we've seen a spike in hate crime since the Brexit vote. Therefore, there can be absolutely no complacency over the issue of defending migrants, defending refugees and combating racism. During the campaign itself, one of the high points for me in a very horrible campaign was the convoy that went out to Calais, that was organised by Stand Up to Racism and by the People's Assembly. It showed hope, it showed unity, it showed that we could stand together. And now people have talked about it. On the 16th of July, there is a demonstration being organised by Stand Up to Racism and the People's Assembly that is opposing austerity, that is opposing racism and arguing to get the Tories out. We've got under 2 weeks to build that into a massive show of strength against racism, against austerity, in support of Jeremy Corbyn. And everybody in this hall, everybody in the movement has to bend their backs to make sure that there are tens of thousands of people on that demonstration on that day. See, we've got a real opportunity here. I don't know if people have heard this story. On Saturday, 15 Nazis decided to demonstrate in Southampton. 1,000 anti-racists turned up to oppose them. We have to mobilise that feeling. But alongside that, we have to reject the idea that what the Brexit vote was simple proof that the white working class in Britain is simply racist. It's not true. We have to take up that argument, because if you believe that seriously, you start to make concessions, as some people in the Labour movement already have, starting to talk about making concessions on the issue of free movement. It is not migrants, it is not refugees that undermine our National Health Service or cut our wages. It is the bosses, it is the Tories, it is the rich. We have to have that message home. It's true that the wealthy voted to stay in, but also millions of people who are anti-racist voted to remain for brilliant reasons, because they oppose racism and they oppose division. And under that basis, whether you're an anti-racist, whether you voted to stay in the EU or to come out of the EU, we now got to unite, and we have to start talking about how do we take these things forward, because we have to be absolutely clear that whatever Tory leader takes over, they will have one answer. That is austerity and racism. That's what they will push through. George Osborne is already talking about cutting corporation tax. There was talk in the background about emergency budgets and the rest of it. Our side has to respond now. We have to resist now. All the talking has to stop. We have to start getting our people moving. And you have the first chance of audience participation tomorrow, because there will be hundreds of thousands of teachers on strike. With them, by the way, will be thousands of university lecturers who are striking directly in solidarity with the teachers' strike. We have to get on those picket lines. We have to get on those demonstrations. And there's national action has reared its head again in this country. We have to say to our union leaders that after years of backing off the fight, they cannot back off the fight anymore. We have to take on austerity, we have to take on the anti-union laws, and we have to start using the power that we really have. That's absolutely crucial for us. It's absolutely crucial that we do that. People have talked about the other mobilisations. The 16th of July is the first step, but at the 2nd of October, Conway spoke earlier on, the Tories are going to Birmingham. It's the second biggest city in Britain. It's a working class, multicultural city. We have to chase those bastards out of town. On the 8th of October, Stand Up to Racism as a conference. It's not just a conference, comrades. What that is a council of war. So in this country, we create a mass movement so the racists are driven backwards, and that every migrant, every refugee knows that they are welcome in this country. We will not let racist attacks bite. We will drive these people off the streets and defend our own. And like I said, in the next few days, we have to defend Jeremy Corbyn in every workplace, every college, every campus, every community. But there's a but. While we stand shoulder to shoulder with everybody in the Labour Party is having that fight, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with Jeremy Corbyn, if we think that the attacks at the moment are vicious and nasty, what do we think the attacks on a Labour government, if it was elected on an anti-austerity programme, would be like? What do we think they'd be like? Well, we know what they'd be like. Look at Syriza. They were elected and gave hope to the whole of Europe on an anti-austerity process. Within months, they were crushed by the weight of the Troika, the bankers, the unelected bureaucrats, and all the rest. Yes, 2 minutes, very interesting, right? So, and all the rest. In France, it's a Labour government, a socialist government, the Hollande government that is sending the police out to attack workers on the streets, to attack youth on the streets when they are fighting back to defend their rights. And every Labour government, every Labour Party comes under the same pressure to make compromises to make the system work. Now, nobody's saying that it is inevitable that a Jeremy Corbyn government or a Labour government, an anti-austerity government will respond in the same way. But we do know they would be under the same pressures. Why? Because our real power doesn't lie in the parliamentary chamber. I mean, for God's sake, anybody who sees the difference between Jeremy Corbyn in the parliamentary chamber, where every MP wants to knife him in the back, and out on the streets over the weekend where thousands were mobilising, knows that our power lies in the workplaces, it lies in the communities, it lies on the campuses. Working class power lies outside of the parliamentary chamber. Why? We're the 5th richest country on earth. Well, by the way, possibly we're the 6th richest country on earth and going downwards at the moment, right, about it. But who makes the wealth? We do. It's not the bankers, it's not the politicians, it's not the rest of them, it's the workers of this country that make the wealth. And therefore, we have potentially massive power. In France, you can see the unions finally using that power. Right, stuff, and we have to start talking. If you want to stop the racists in Britain, if you want to stop UKIP and the Tories and the rest of it, we have to finally use our power here. See, we know we are in an absolute supreme political crisis, and that means we have to talk about how do we shape the situation. The SWP wants to work with everybody who wants to see a fight against racism and austerity. But in the end, if you want to stop austerity, if you want to stop racism and war, you have to talk about getting rid of this system root and branch, and that means revolution. Revolution is not about a minority taking action, it's about handing power back to the 99% and taking it from the 1%. That's what revolution in this situation is about. We're in complete solidarity with comrades in the Labour Party who are fighting at the minute, but we believe you need a different kind of party. Not a party that's about compromise between left and right in order to have an abstract unity. Not a party that can make compromises over immigration or any other issue and stuff, but a party that's absolutely clear. We stand clear against austerity. We stand clear against racism and Islamophobia. We stand together, write stuff about it. We take decisions together, but then we act together, and we're not hostage to the right at any level. It's important that Jeremy Corbyn is a Labour leader. That's a good thing. But we want to try and create a party of leaders, a party where in every working class community, in every workplace, there are people uniting with others, but fighting for revolutionary socialist politics. Marx said that people make history, but not in circumstances of their own choosing. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a choice. Either Britain can end up as a miserable racist shithole full of austerity, or it can become a beacon for working class people and resistance across the world. We believe that the SWP can play a major role in making sure the positive outcomes happening. That's why we're absolutely unapologetic to ask you, if you haven't joined the Socialist Workers Party, you should do it now.